Throwaway account. I'm 35M. My wife is 33F, married 7 years. No kids yet, partly by choice, partly because the timing never felt right to her. We were always described as passionate. Big love, big fights, big apologies. I used to think that meant we cared deeply. The first time she crossed a line, she apologized so well that I forgot to be angry. She cried, owned it, said all the right things, told me she'd never hurt me like that again. I remember thinking, this is what accountability looks like. I didn't realize yet that apologies can become tools if they're never followed by change. Over time, a pattern formed. She'd say something cruel, do something hurtful, then pull me back with remorse. Flowers, notes, late-night talks about growth and healing. Each apology reset the clock. Each time, I believed we were starting fresh. The trouble was how confident she became that I'd forgive her. She'd snap at me in public, then squeeze my hand later and whisper, "We'll talk at home." At home, I'd end up comforting her for feeling guilty. Somehow, my hurt always became secondary to her emotions. The moment that sticks with me happened after a fight about nothing. She looked at me and said calmly, "You know, I always come back. Why do you make such a big deal out of things?" I laughed it off. I shouldn't have, because that's when I realized the apology wasn't the end of the cycle. It was the middle. After that comment, I became hyper-aware of how easily the words came to her. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean it. I was just overwhelmed." They flowed out the moment I showed any sign of pulling away, like a reflex she'd perfected over time. The fights followed a script. She'd lash out, sharp comments, dismissive tones, sometimes outright insults. If I reacted emotionally, she'd accuse me of escalating things. If I went quiet, she'd panic. That's when the apology would arrive, right on cue. Tears, self-blame, promises. It was so consistent, it almost felt timed. The twist was how quickly things went back to normal afterward. Too normal. No awkwardness. No rebuilding. Just a reset button pressed without any actual repair. When I tried to talk about what had happened days later, she'd frown and say, "Why are you still stuck on that?" I already apologized. As if the apology erased the impact, I started noticing that her behavior never really changed. Only her remorse got more polished. She learned exactly how much guilt to show, exactly how long to wait before being affectionate again. And I learned to swallow my discomfort because bringing it up made me feel unreasonable. One night, after yet another apology, she smiled and said, "See, we're good at getting through things." I nodded, but something inside me shifted, because getting through something isn't the same as healing. And for the first time, I wonder if the apologies were keeping us together, or quietly keeping me stuck. Once I noticed a pattern, I couldn't stop seeing it. The apologies weren't bridges anymore, they were barricades. Every "I'm sorry" seemed to shut down the conversation, instead of opening it up. If I tried to talk about how something affected me, she'd sigh and say, "I already took responsibility. What more do you want from me?" That question always made me feel greedy for wanting change, not just words. The twist came when I realized I was adjusting my behavior to avoid triggering the apology cycle. I chose my words carefully. I downplayed my feelings. I let comments slide that used to bother me because I didn't want another emotional cleanup operation afterward. Peace, even fragile peace, started to feel easier than honesty. She, on the other hand, grew bolder. She'd say things like, "You know I don't mean it," right after saying something hurtful, as if intent canceled impact. Once, after snapping at me in front of friends, she leaned over later and whispered, "Don't take it personally. You know how I get." The apology came later that night, right on schedule. What scared me most was how normal it all felt. I wasn't angry all the time. I wasn't miserable. I was just smaller, less reactive, less expressive. I mistook that for maturity. Then one evening, after a particularly harsh argument followed by a tearful apology, she asked, almost casually, "You're not going to leave, right?" I said no without thinking. As soon as the word left my mouth, I realized how much power she just confirmed, and how little I was using of my own. After she asked if I was going to leave, and I said no, something shifted. It wasn't dramatic. It was subtle, which made it worse. The tension she used to carry after fights disappeared. She seemed lighter, more certain, like she'd just received confirmation that the safety net was still there. The next argument came quicker than usual. Over something small, me forgetting to pick up groceries. She snapped, sharp and dismissive, right back into old habits. I remember standing there thinking, that was fast. When I pushed back, she rolled her eyes and said, "Why are you so sensitive lately?" The apology arrived later that night, exactly as expected. Same words, same tone, same tears. But this time, I felt detached, like I was watching a replay of a scene I'd memorized. She said she was scared of losing me, said she loved me, said she'd do better. Here's the twist. For the first time, I didn't feel relief. I felt trapped, because I realized the apology wasn't about repairing the damage. It was about restoring the status quo. It was there to make sure nothing actually changed, to make sure I stayed. I asked her what doing better meant. She looked confused, then slightly annoyed. "You know," she said, "being more careful. Careful, not different, not accountable. Just careful enough to avoid consequences." That night, lying in bed next to her, I understood something I hadn't before. The apologies weren't proof that she cared. They were proof that she knew exactly how much she could get away with. The next time she apologized, I realized something was missing. Not emotion. There were plenty of tears. But urgency. It was like she was going through the motions, confident the outcome was already secured. And maybe it was. Up until then, apologies had always worked on me. They softened me, reset me. This one didn't. She'd snapped at me earlier that day, sharp in public, over a joke I made at dinner. On the drive home, she didn't say a word. At home, she cried. Said she hated herself for hurting me. Said she didn't know why she reacted that way. Said she'd try harder. I waited for the familiar relief to wash over me. It didn't. Instead, I noticed how quickly she shifted once she felt me pulling away. How the tears dried the moment I stopped engaging. How she checked my face for reassurance mid-apology, like she was watching a gauge. That was the twist I couldn't ignore anymore. The apology was an expression of regret. It was a test. That night, I didn't comfort her. I just said I needed space. Her reaction was immediate. She went cold, accused me of punishing her, said I was being cruel for not accepting her apology. Somehow, refusing to reset the cycle made me the villain. Lying awake later, I understood the truth. Apologies only work when they're paired with change. Without that, they're just pauses between the same behavior. And for the first time, I wondered how many times I'd mistaken relief for healing, and how much of myself I'd given up to keep that illusion alive. The Rayall break didn't come during a fight. It came after one. She said something cutting. Again, then retreated into tears. Again. Normally, that's where I'd step in. I'd sit beside her, reassure her, tell her we'd figure it out. This time, I didn't move. I watched her cry, and instead of feeling panic or guilt, I felt tired, deeply tired, not of the argument, but of the role I kept playing, the fixer, the forgiver, the one who made sure things went back to normal, no matter how much it cost me. That's when the twist hit me. Her apologies weren't for what she'd done. They were for how close she'd come to consequences. I asked her a simple question. What are you going to do differently next time? She stopped crying almost immediately, looked at me like I'd asked something unreasonable. After a pause, she said, "I'll try to control myself better." That answer told me everything. Control, not understanding, not growth, just better containment. When I didn't respond, she got defensive, said I was interrogating her, said apologies should be enough in a healthy marriage. I realized then that in her mind, forgiveness was my responsibility, not something she earned through change. That night, I slept on the couch. She accused me of being dramatic, of making a statement. She wasn't wrong. I was making one, just not the one she thought. For the first time, I wasn't choosing peace. I was choosing honesty, even if it meant things would finally fall apart. sleeping on the couch, flipped a switch I didn't know existed. The next morning, she acted like I had crossed a line. Cold voice, short answers. No coffee made for me, which sounds small, but it was deliberate. When I tried to talk, she said, "I'm not going to chase you when you're being immature." That was the twist. The moment I stopped absorbing the damage quietly, I became the problem. She told me I was holding the relationship hostage. That withholding comfort was emotional manipulation. That a loving partner wouldn't punish someone for making a mistake they'd already apologized for. She used the word mistake a lot, like repetition could shrink what had been happening for years. I pointed out calmly that the same thing kept happening. Same behavior, same apology, same reset. She cut me off and said, "So what? You want to grovel forever?" As if the only alternatives were endless shame or zero accountability. What shook me most was how quickly her vulnerability disappeared. No tears this time. No softness. Just irritation that the system wasn't working anymore. She said, "I feel like I'm walking on eggshells around you now." The irony almost made me laugh. That afternoon, she texted me from the other room. "I can't be with someone who keeps score." I stared at the message and realized something uncomfortable but freeing. I wasn't keeping score. I was finally paying attention. After that text, something inside me finally let go of hope. Not in a dramatic, heartbreaking way. More like setting down a heavy bag I didn't realize I'd been carrying. Hope had been the thing keeping me stuck, convincing me that if I just explained myself better, forgave faster, stayed calmer, things would eventually change. Once hope faded, attention took its place. I started watching her without trying to fix anything. I noticed how quickly she shifted moods depending on my reaction. If I was distant, she became sweet. If I was calm, she grew sharp. If I stood my ground, she accused me of cruelty. Every response I gave seemed to trigger a different version of her, but none of them involved actual accountability. The twist came when she tried a new approach. Instead of apologizing, she minimized. "It wasn't that bad. You're remembering it wrong. Other couples fight way worse than we do." It was like she was rewriting the past in real time, shrinking it until it fit the version of herself she needed to believe in. I realized in how much work I'd been doing for her, holding on to the memory of what happened, carrying the weight of it, while she focused on moving past it as quickly as possible. Forgetting was her healing strategy. Remembering was mine. One night, she asked why I seemed so distant lately. I told her the truth. I was paying attention. She didn't like that answer. She said it felt like I was judging her. Maybe I was, but not in the way she meant. I wasn't deciding whether she was good or bad. I was deciding whether this was something I could live with for the rest of my life. The next argument started the way they all did, small, almost forgettable. I didn't respond fast enough to a question she asked. She took that as disinterest. Her voice sharpened. Mine stayed calm. That alone changed the dynamic. She accused me of being passive-aggressive, of checking out. Normally, that's where I defend myself. Explain my tone, try to de-escalate. This time I didn't. I just listened. And that unsettled her more than anything else I'd ever done. She kept pushing, raising the stakes, waiting for me to react. When I still didn't, she finally snapped, "Say something." I told her I didn't see the point in arguing when nothing ever changed. That was it. No blame. No lecture. Just a statement. The twist was her reaction. She didn't deny it. She got scared. She asked if I was planning to leave. Not angrily, quietly. That question landed heavy, because it was the first time she'd acknowledged consequences without immediately trying to control them. I told her I didn't know. That answer was honest, and it shifted the balance. Later that night, she apologized again. Softer this time. More careful. But I noticed what was missing. Curiosity about how I felt. The apology was still about smoothing things over, not understanding the damage. Lying awake, I realized something important. Arguing had kept the cycle alive. Silence, intentional, grounded silence, was showing me exactly how fragile it was. And for the first time, I wasn't afraid of what would happen next. After that night, the house went unusually quiet. Not tense quiet, careful, quiet. She was suddenly polite, considerate, almost gentle. She asked before making plans. Thanked me for small things. Touched my arm in passing like she was reminding herself I was still there. Anyone else would have called it improvement. It didn't feel like that to me. It felt like containment. The twist was how quickly she adapted. No reflection period. No awkward adjustment. Just a new mode activated the moment she sensed the old one might fail. I realized then that this wasn't about learning or growth. It was about keeping me from leaving. She suggested therapy again, but framed it carefully. Not we need help. I need support, and she was willing to come along. When I asked what she hoped would change, she said she wanted us to communicate better so things don't escalate. Escalate, as if the problem was volume, not repetition. One evening, she cooked dinner and lit candles. Halfway through the meal, she said, "I've been thinking about how hard this is for you." I waited for more. It never came. No specifics. No acknowledgement. Just empathy-shaped words. That's when I understood something crucial. Calm doesn't always mean safe. Sometimes it's just the absence of friction because one person is holding themselves very still. That night, lying awake, I realized I wasn't waiting for another apology. I was waiting for proof of change. And I already knew it wasn't coming. The longer the calm lasted, the clearer it became that it wasn't peace. It was strategy. She was careful now, almost scripted. Every interaction felt like it had been run through a filter designed to avoid conflict at all costs. And for the first time, I wasn't comforted by that. I was unsettled. The twist came one afternoon when she slipped. We were talking about something small, weekend plans, I think, and I disagreed with her. Gently. Nothing emotional. She paused. Then her tone changed just enough for me to recognize it. Sharp, impatient, familiar. She caught herself quickly and softened again, but it was too late. I'd seen it. The calm wasn't growth. It was restraint. Later that night, she apologized preemptively. Not for snapping, she didn't mention that, but for how hard things have been lately. That's when it clicked. She wasn't responding to what she did. She was responding to the risk of losing me. The apologies, the kindness, the patience, none of it existed unless consequences were on the table. I realized then how conditional everything was. Respect showed up only when I pulled away. Care appeared only when I threatened the balance. Love, at least the way it was being offered, depended on my silence. That was the moment I stopped asking myself, can this get better? And started asking the question that mattered more. Why does it only get better when I'm halfway out the door? I expected some big internal moment where everything clicked, anger, clarity, resolve. Instead, the decision arrived quietly, almost shyly, like it didn't want to draw attention to itself. I was brushing my teeth one morning, half awake, staring at my own reflection, when it hit me. I can't keep doing this. Not in a dramatic way. In a tired, factual way. The twist was how calm I felt once I admitted it to myself. No panic, no rush to act. Just a steady understanding that this wasn't something I needed to analyze further. I already had all the data. Years of it. I started making small, practical plans. Not leaving yet, just preparing. I moved some personal documents into a folder. I told a close friend what was really going on, without minimizing or joking. Saying it out loud felt strange, like I was finally telling the story without editing it to protect her. She sensed the shift almost immediately, asked if I was okay, said I seemed distant. I told her I was thinking. She nodded, but I could see the tension in her shoulders. The careful calm sharpened again. That night, she apologized, again, softer than usual, more deliberate. I listened, thanked her for saying it, and didn't promise anything in return. Her eyes searched my face, looking for reassurance. I didn't give it. For the first time, the apology didn't reset anything. And in that space where the reset used to be, I felt something solid begin to form. Not anger, resolve. The next apology came 2 days later, and it sounded exactly like the others. Same phrasing, same soft voice, same careful timing. Right after a small disagreement, right before things could spiral. I listened without interrupting. noticing how she paused after each sentence, waiting for me to reassure her that everything was okay. I didn't. That was the twist she wasn't prepared for. She asked if I was mad. I said no. She asked if I was okay. I said I wasn't sure. The uncertainty unsettled her more than anger ever had. She pressed for clarity. What does that mean? Are you leaving? And I realized how much she relied on my predictability. Forgiveness had been the glue holding everything together. Without it, the cycle had nothing to reset. She tried to negotiate, promised to be more mindful, asked what I needed from her. When I said I needed consistent change, not words, she looked genuinely confused, as if she'd never considered that apologies were supposed to be followed by something tangible. That night, she grew distant, cold. The warmth disappeared the moment reassurance did. And there it was, clear as day. The kindness wasn't unconditional. It was contingent on my willingness to smooth things over. Lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, I felt a strange sense of peace. Not happiness, clarity. I finally understood that nothing was broken in me for wanting more than apologies. What was broken was the cycle, and I wasn't going to step back into it. Once the apology stopped working, the pressure ramped up. That was the next phase, and it arrived faster than I expected. She became restless, irritable, scanning me for reactions the way someone checks a pulse. When reassurance didn't come, frustration took its place. She accused me of pulling away on purpose, said I was being emotionally withholding, that I was changing the rules without warning. The irony was almost painful. She'd been changing the rules for years, and I had just adapted quietly. The moment I stopped, it became a problem. The twist came during a conversation that should have been minor. I disagreed with her about something trivial, and she snapped, sharper than she had in weeks. When I didn't respond emotionally, she scoffed and said, "Wow, so now you're pretending to be calm so you can feel superior?" That sentence told me everything. Calm wasn't allowed unless it served her. Distance wasn't acceptable unless she initiated it. Growth was only welcome when it didn't threaten control. In that moment, I saw the pattern in full, how quickly empathy turned into contempt when it stopped being effective. Later that night, she tried to soften again, apologized for snapping, reached for my hand. I gently pulled away, not to punish her, but because it didn't feel honest to accept comfort I didn't trust. Her face changed. Hurt, yes, but also something else. Fear. And that's when I understood the truth I'd been circling for weeks. She wasn't afraid of losing the relationship. She was afraid of losing the version of me who made it easy to keep things exactly the same. The end didn't come with a final fight. There was no dramatic explosion, no last cruel sentence we could point to later and say, "That's where it broke." It ended the same way it had been unraveling all along. Quietly, once I stopped participating in the cycle, I told her I needed space, real space, not a reset, not a pause, not another apology followed by nothing. She asked if this was because she wasn't perfect. That question almost pulled me back in, because it framed the issue as standards instead of patterns. I didn't take the bait. I told her this wasn't about perfection. It was about trust that words meant something. She cried. She apologized again, softer than ever. And for the first time, I felt nothing in response. No relief, no guilt, just a sad certainty that we were speaking different languages now. What I finally understood is this: apologies aren't change. They're only meaningful when they're the beginning of something different, not the end of the conversation. When "I'm sorry" becomes a way to avoid consequences, it stops being remorse and starts being control. I don't hate her. I don't think she's a monster. But I've learned that loving someone doesn't mean accepting a cycle that slowly teaches you your pain is temporary, and theirs is permanent. If you're reading this and recognizing your own relationship in it, here's what I wish I'd known sooner. An apology that doesn't lead to change isn't healing. It's a delay. And sometimes the bravest thing you can do is stop waiting for it to finally mean something.